If you ever thought Jack the Ripper was the epitome of depraved evil, then perhaps you haven't heard of Sonny Bean. This story didn't unfold in foggy London, but in a colder, wilder and much more forgotten place, the windswept cliffs of Galloway, Scotland. There no one screamed and no one heard, and for 25 years, no one understood why hundreds of people simply vanished without a trace. What really happened? Who was behind this string of disappearances? And why does Scottish history want to bury this story forever? To answer those questions, we have to go back to the 15th century, a time when the line between civilization and savagery was as thin as a morning mist. In the small village of East Lothian, far from any major city, lived a poor coward boy named Alexander Sawney Bean. No education, no land, no future. His family survived by skinning animals and doing the lowest jobs in society. But from an early age, Sawney showed disturbing signs. He liked blood, wasn't afraid of corpses, and often snuck into cemeteries just to stare at decaying bodies. No one disciplined him, and no one paid attention. Sawney grew up in absolute silence, as if his fate was sealed to be separated from humanity. As an adult, he left home to join a traveling circus troupe, then disappeared for many years. But when he returned to Galloway, he wasn't a child anymore, but a gaunt man with fiery eyes and a woman by his side, Agnes Douglas, who villagers later called the Black Witch of Galloway. Agnes wasn't normal either, banished from her village for practicing dark arts and making medicine from animal carcasses. She was rumored to have killed her own child to sacrifice to demons. These two met like a blood moon encountering a black sun. They didn't live in a village, build a house, or buy land. They vanished from society and chose to live in a sea cave among the cliffs, called Benane Head, a dark cave 200 meters deep, accessible only at low tide. From that place, darkness began to spread. No one saw them for years. But then people started disappearing. First a merchant from Glasgow, then a group of pilgrims, then a farming family. Caravans vanished, horses galloped back riderless, but most terrifying were the things that washed ashore. Fingers, human ears, tongues, intestines, legs, as if someone was processing bodies and dumping the leftovers into the sea. Authorities thought it was pirates. But why no loot, no missing gold? Why were there never any witnesses? No one found an answer, because all traces vanished into the rock and the sea. But while the world remained skeptical, deep within Benane Head Cave, Sawney and Agnes were living the life of a dynasty, a cannibalistic dynasty. In the damp darkness, they bore children without hospitals, no one knew, and taught their offspring only one thing: humans were born to be eaten. They had no names, they had no written language, they didn't know what money was, but they knew how to hunt people, sever joints, drown bodies, and hang meat to ferment for winter. Sonny Bean became the patriarch of a deformed empire with 14 children and later dozens of grandchildren, all born of incest. For 25 years, they operated like a pack of wolves. At night, they left the cave to hunt. By morning, they hid underground with dried human flesh hanging on ropes, intestines wrung out for bowstrings, skulls used as eating bowls. Bones were buried in the sand, excess tossed into the sea. They ate everything: children, women, priests, even soldiers occasionally vanished without a trace while camping near Benane Head. No one dared to travel the coastal road anymore. People called the area the cursed strip of land. Stories slowly turned into legends. Children were warned, if you're not good, Sonny Bean will crawl out of his cave and eat you in your sleep. But that wasn't a fairy tale. It was the truth. Time passed as if history itself was afraid to look at that place. The Bean family grew larger and larger. From the original two, they bore a new generation, then another. No one had a surname, no one had a birth certificate, no one had ever set foot outside of their society. To them, the world out there was just a giant farm, and humans were livestock to be killed. The children born in the cave had no concept of morality, didn't understand language beyond growls and screams. They learned to stalk prey from the age of 3. Knew how to break human legs with stone clubs and drag bodies back like hunting dogs with their kill. But the world couldn't keep its eyes shut forever. One day, a merchant couple from Edinburgh, returning from the market, got lost on the coastal road. It was a stretch of road locals always avoided, especially in the late afternoon. But the couple didn't believe in monsters. They believed in reason and the crucifix hanging around their necks. As their carriage rounded a bend near the cliffs, a dark shadow lunged out of the bushes. Before the husband could draw his knife, he was pulled from the saddle, blood splattering his wife's face. 10, 12 figures emerged from the darkness, wearing nothing but animal skins, hands clutching stones and bones, eyes burning like wild beasts. They didn't roar. They didn't scream. They lunged like a silent nightmare. But this time, there was a difference. The wife drew a sword. She wasn't an ordinary woman, but the daughter of a military commander. She pulled the dagger from beneath her skirt, stabbing the first one directly in the neck. As her husband was being torn apart, she stabbed the second and screamed like she'd never screamed before. And fortunately, there was a group of hunters in the woods. They heard her screams, rushed over, and for the first time, a witness survived to tell the tale. News spread like wildfire. A savage, wild, cannibalistic family was lurking somewhere along the coast. But who would believe it? Nobles dismissed it as nonsense. Clergymen called it God's punishment. But the common folk didn't. They began to arm themselves, form patrol groups, and light torches at night. But every time they reached Benane Head Cave, the tide was high. No one dared to swim into a dark, flooded tunnel more than 200 meters long. No one had the guts to enter a place where no living person ever emerged. Sonny knew that. He smiled. A twisted smile in the darkness, and he ordered his children to hunt deeper, not individuals, but groups. He wanted to intimidate. He wanted to leave a mark as a declaration. We're here, and there's nothing you can do about it. And then, bodies started washing up. 3 missing children were found in a sack by the stream. No heads, no arms, only bodies with all their organs removed like a skinned rabbit. A monk was found hanging upside down from a tree, his intestines tied into a pentagram. A nun was discovered in a praying position, but without eyes, without a tongue, and her heart had been ripped out. No one was laughing anymore. Townspeople flocked to the royal castle in Edinburgh, bringing evidence, skulls, bones, and blood oaths. At that time, King James VI was still young, but he wasn't someone to easily overlook things. He didn't believe in ghosts, but he believed in justice. And when he personally saw the wedding ring of a vanished nobleman found inside a gutted shark, he understood. This was real. There was no longer any doubt. A human slaughterhouse was operating beneath the Scottish soil. The king issued an urgent order: allocate funds, mobilize 400 royal soldiers, 2 packs of hunting dogs, and a tide breaker team. Objective: assault Benane Head Cave from both land and sea. Sonny Bean had no idea he was being hunted in return. That dawn was unlike any other day. 400 Scottish royal soldiers, under the Red Cross banner, moved silently along the Galloway coast. Leading the procession was King James VI himself, accompanied by southern lords, 2 clergymen, and a specially trained team of divers. The hunting dogs growled furiously as they neared a dark rock outcrop, where waves crashed like an incessant roar. That was Benane Head. The entire army stood still as the tide began to recede. The cave mouth appeared, showing no special signs. A small rock crevice, just wide enough for a person to crouch and crawl in. But inside it was another world. As the first troops lit torches and entered, the flickering yellow light began to illuminate something no one had ever imagined. Human remains everywhere: wrists, femurs, human skulls piled up like rotten wood. There were small children hanging upside down from the cave ceiling by ropes made of human hair. Blood-rusted chains were shackled to rock crevices where torture might have taken place. Dried human hands hung in chains. On the walls, crude drawings in blood, a language no one understood, except those who had gone mad. Deeper still was the dining room, a wide, open space like a catacomb, with dozens of human bodies disemboweled, their organs exposed. A few heads were still intact, eyes wide open, as if they couldn't believe they were dead. The stench was so overpowering that many soldiers vomited on the spot. But what truly stunned them wasn't the smell of corpses, but the sound. From the back of the cave came growls, then a horde of naked people rushed forward, their skin as pale as dead fish, eyes lacking pupils, teeth protruding like wild animals. These were no longer human, they were something else. Children who had grown up with human flesh as their only meal had become a new species, a hybrid of human and beast. Unable to speak, without fear, knowing only how to bite, tear, kill, the confrontation began. Scottish soldiers opened fire, but the Bean children were too numerous and too accustomed to the darkness. The battle didn't last long, but it left dozens of casualties. Finally, with the help of hunting dogs and explosives to block escape routes, the entire cave was taken. All of the Bean offspring were captured alive or killed on the spot, except for 2 who managed to flee, but were dragged back by dogs with torn throats. Sonny Bean and Agnes were captured alive in the throne room, a rock platform inside the cave, where they were carving up a freshly dead soldier. Sawney looked at King James not with fear, but with a smile, a twisted, blood-stained smile. Agnes was silent, muttering something in a language only she understood. One soldier swore he heard her call out, "Beelzebub." The entire clan was escorted to Edinburgh Castle in separate iron cages. Crowds poured into the streets, cursing, throwing stones, spitting. But the most shocking thing was the trial that lasted 15 minutes. No lawyers, no defense, no trial as humans, because they were no longer considered human. The charges were listed in writing: murder, dismemberment, cannibalism, incest, torture, sacrifice, blasphemy. The estimated number of victims alone reached 1,000, more than any massacre in history at that time. Witnesses spoke of children taken never to return, missing relatives, and body parts washing ashore. What was once considered legend was now real. King James did not allow execution by hanging. He ordered, chop off all their hands and feet, leaving them to bleed to death in iron cages in the public square. Agnes was tied to a stake and burned alive like a witch. In the flames, she smiled and repeated one phrase: "They will return." Sawney was the last to be executed. Before he died, he uttered a sentence that still sends shivers down the spine of Scots: "You can kill me, but you cannot kill hunger. It is in all of you." And then he died, but the nightmare hadn't. After Sonny Bean and his family were executed, the land of Galloway seemed to breathe a sigh of relief. No more missing people, no more bodies washing ashore. The coastal roads were open once again, but that peace didn't last long, because the haunting legacy left by the Bean family could not be easily buried. Villagers began to say that whenever the tide went out, they could still hear screams from Benane Head Cave, as if the vengeful spirits of the murdered offspring had not found peace. Some said that on the thickest foggy nights of the month, a gaunt figure would be seen standing at the edge of the cliffs, staring out to sea with empty eyes. Fishermen had reported seeing small footprints on the sand, even though no children ever dared to venture there. Some historians of the time suggested that a few of the Bean family children might have escaped, hidden deep in the forests, survived, and passed on their bloodline. Deformities, disabilities, and the habit of eating raw flesh and drinking blood, according to doctors in the Ayrshire region, still appeared sporadically for many generations afterward. The Scottish government did the opposite. They erased all records, never mentioning the name Sonny Bean in any official documents. In textbooks, this event simply didn't exist. Monasteries and churches held no prayers for the victims. Everything was silently pushed into the shadows, as if they wanted history to forget that Scotland once harbored a cannibalistic family underground for 25 years. But the people didn't forget. From the 16th century onwards, the name Sawney became a slang term for wild Scots among the English aristocracy. Children were warned that if they didn't go to sleep on time, Sonny Bean would come and cut off their ears and make porridge with their eyes. In pubs, it was rumored that the strange meat in a stew on a rainy night might be leftovers from the Bean era. Even folk plays reenacted scenes of the Bean offspring crawling on the ground like rats, whispering in a demonic language. However, a century later, a different perspective emerged. Some scholars, historians, and journalists began to ask, did Sonny Bean truly exist? Or was it merely a political fabrication, serving a more insidious purpose? Remember, the time King James VI moved to eradicate the Bean family was also when he was consolidating his power, clashing with the often discontented southern lords. Could the story of a cannibalistic family have been a tool to intimidate, to prove, I am the one who brings justice? And if there are no records, no graves, no ruins, could it all just be a political staged act? A 19th century French archaeologist once visited Benin Head and noted, no human bone was ever found in the cave. But deep within the rock face, a faint inscription was carved by hand, I live in you now. To this day, the origin of that quote has not been verified. But if you ask the people of Galloway today whether they believe in Sonny Bean, they won't answer. They will look at you with a strange gaze, then quietly say, in winter, don't go near the sea, especially when the tide is low, because beneath the rocks, there's still something that hasn't died.